Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan at MS Pearce. This is very early on a Sunday morning for me because I'm going to be unable to get any further videos out today till very much later, and I'll be up north of the UK in Blackburn. So now on the sunny south coast, it's not sunny, it's raining like a muddy funster. I'm going to do my news segment. So this is a Ukraine war update news segment for the 26th of March 2023. Let's get straight to our opening gambit. This is where I usually start, which is the Ukrainian release figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats, inaccurate propaganda. I think they're actually accurate these days, and I like to give you evidence to support that conclusion. And they're also very useful for working out the trends and what's been sort of generally happening the day before. 660 liquidated personnel, so that's still high, but less than yesterday and less than the rest of the week generally. But it seems that as the numbers have dipped for liquidated personnel, although still high, the numbers for equipment taken out has been significant, and this was the case yesterday. 15 tanks taken out yesterday, 15 armored personnel vehicles, and that can include IPCs. So that is a massive number of both those types of vehicles. 8 artillery systems, 2 MLRS. Remember, yesterday we had a really high number of MLRS. All of these numbers are not good for Russia. 1 anti-aircraft system. If that's a high value system, that could be a problem, something like an S300, but even, your books and other older systems are still really valuable. 2 drones, 3 vehicles and fuel tanks, 3 pieces of special equipment. That's fairly consistent at the moment, pieces of special equipment being taken out. I don't know whether they are trying to target things like radar systems purposefully. It seems that way. I mean, Andrew Perpetua says, from what I have heard, Ukrainian artillery did a lot of work today, counter-battery fire, so this being yesterday, counter-battery fire in particular. It is getting increasingly dangerous for Russian artillerymen, and I've talked about this. It seems to be vindication of my claims that they are apparently concentrating on taking out artillery systems. So that seems to be accepted now by a few sources. But again, 15 tanks and 15 APCs, double figures is never good for the Russians there. Okay, let's try and look at the troop figures as being pretty bad just in general. A video came out recently of Russian soldiers from a storm unit consisting of both convicts and mobilized. They produced a video saying that during the assault on Vodyane, they were blocking units, preventing their retreat. So these are units that shoot you if you try and retreat. So your own troops shoot you if you go back. The enemy troops shoot you if you go forward, and you're getting stuff dropped on you from above. So no matter what direction you go in, you've got a high possibility of dying. And there's been a number of videos claiming that this is the case from Russians themselves. And here we have, by the way, apparently these are not convicts, they're all mobilized. So that video came out, they're all mobilized with previous military experience. So this isn't just happening to kind of Wagner-style convicts. This is Vodyane in the Avdiivka area. Grayzone found all these people on social media. Russians use blocking units against experienced, valuable, for them at least, mobilized troops. There's been a lot of discussion in Russian channels today, so this is yesterday, about this video, mainly raging at the commanders. So there are a lot of people in the military blogger, super nationalist, pro-war people who are really angry about the way this war is being conducted by the Russians. Some said that similar situations happening across many other units. They don't just talk about it and they just don't talk about it or make video appeals. So this is happening a lot, and the complaints are pretty substantial, and there are the complaints are very public with the videos that get made, but it's happening elsewhere as well. So this is a real problem for the Russians, and feeds into an understanding of why their losses are as high as they are. Right, HIMARS been fairly quiet on the HIMARS front, at least as far as video confirmation is concerned. I mean, they're still happening, the HIMARS attacks. That much is almost certainly true. Here, 2 HIMARS missiles have struck an area and a larger compound in Russian-occupied Svatovo. So that's up north between Kupiansk and Kreminna. Russians use that building in this residential area as a command post. So these will be precision hits. These won't just be randomly hitting residential areas. This will be a definite intentional hit here. But this is just very interesting to see how destructive HIMARS are. Pretty incredible. There you go. And there's someone's got it on super slow motion and have frozen the frame where you actually see it come down. You can see it just before it hits there. Just have a look in this area, and you get a very thin, small missile. And the quote is something like, such a big impact for such a small missile. There you go. And that is the first one, and the second one hits as well. Bang. That is apparently a military target, but you can see the destruction of that, the destructive capability of that missile as it throws debris all around. That is in Svatova, and that video did the rounds yesterday. It's been geolocated as well. Yeah, it's interesting bit of footage. So Ukraine's general staff says it had to repel 50 attacks today. That's yesterday again, despite thoughts that the invaders may be switching to defense. Now, 50 is not a lot, actually. I have seen a claim that there was 80 yesterday, so I don't know. But either way, that is lower than it was, on previous occasions in the past, considerably. 50 attacks across the front line is not a lot. The enemy is concentrating its main efforts on conducting offensive operations in Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Marinka areas. Yes, just I think that's reflective of the fact that, well, the claim that Russia appears to be culminating. Now, I talked to you the other day about Sumy up the north of Ukraine, where they received a barrage of these larger bombs that may well have been fitted with glide kits that were released by 10 or so Russian airplanes. They did this aerial bombardment of Bilipilia. Well, now they've released, it looks like, some CCTV footage from afar. And this is actually from Rybar, who says, again, about the airstrikes on Bilipilia last Friday night. We got new details and even surveillance cam footage of the strikes. So according to Sumy region residents familiar with the situation, a week before the strike, a small Russian group with a tank crossed the border and attacked. They took Ukrainian prisoners who gave Russian command intelligence on military targets in Bilipilia. On the night of March the 24th, the strike began. It came in 3 waves. Military targets were hit using precise systems and modified FAB. So those are those big bombs, the modified interguided bombs. And here is the footage that Rybar provides. I'm going to turn the sound off. But, to take what anyone says with a pinch of salt, I don't know whether they had come across a border, captured someone, and then got some news of military targets in the area, or whether this is kind of indiscriminate bombing of this town. I guess you would think there'd have to be. You're not going to waste those planes and bombs on indiscriminate bombing. So you'd imagine they are trying to go for specific military targets here, but I don't know. That's thinking that their decisions are rational, and it's not always the case, it appears. But to be fair to the Russians, this will be. I'm pretty sure this will be attacking something specific here. Having said that, it's quite widespread impacts on Bilipilia. So who knows what the exact targets were, but that's the footage that there is, and that does go on. And then Russia on fire. So we got 154 kilometers from Moscow. There are large-scale fires broken out in a warehouse with paints and varnishes. Being a number of paints and varnish warehouses, it's not a good time to be in that industry, I don't think, in Russia. But yeah, there's Russia on fire again. Another instance. I'd really like to see recently updated figures on these sorts of fires for Russia, because they are having these on a really dangerously consistent level. Right, let's go to other sort of military type bits of news. So Putin has said Moscow is to place nuclear weapons in Belarus. This was on the news big time yesterday. The US has reacted cautiously. So this isn't that Belarus are going to use those nuclear missiles. These will be used, as I understand it, by the Russians, but they will have nuclear capable planes that can drop nuclear or send off nuclear missiles, and they will have nuclear missiles in Belarus. Um, uh, so that is, and Belarus apparently is fine with that. That's obviously big news. Is that just a kind of brinkmanship again? I'm not sure. Saber rattling from Russia. There's a lot to be said of Putin kind of reacting to the use of depleted uranium, which they use anyway, reacting to the lack of success for the Russian troops in their offensives and all this kind of stuff, and this is his next move. Ukraine has said the Bakhmut situation is stabilizing, but Putin has played down tank shortage. I'm going to get onto that in my military aid section. He's made some fairly explicit claims about tank manufacture. And here, in fact, this is a summary of what he said. So he made a bunch of statements yesterday in an interview to journalists, sitting quite a long way away from him, as per normal. So Putin said Russia will not give tactical weapons to Belarus, but will deploy them there and train their military. So there you go. On July the 1st, a tactical nuclear weapon storage facility in Belarus will be completed. Iskander systems have been handed over. Ukraine is using 5,000 shells a day, while the US makes only 14 to 15,000 per month. So it's obviously having to go at them for using their shells unsustainably. Russia's defense industry will produce 3 times more ammunition than the West can supply to Ukraine. We'll see what happens there. I don't know if that's a claim that he can back up with the receipts there, because the Allies are ramping up production, and we're going to learn about that in a second. And I don't know how much artillery ammunition Russia can produce. The West sends 400 tanks to Ukraine. Russia will produce more than 1,600. Asterisks over 3 years. But that's a claim we'll return to in a second. Russia can answer to the transfer of depleted uranium munitions. The Russian armed forces have hundreds of thousands of similar munitions. So now it's not about escalation. It's like, we've got them too. Okay, so it's just like for like. And he agrees with Seymour Hersh that the Nord Stream blasts were orchestrated by US intelligence. More on that soon. The world situation and Chinese peace plan were discussed at the meeting with Xi Jinping. Russia is not against the dollar. The US themselves caused its usage to go down. So that's what he said. Right. The Ukraine Defense Ministry calls for an information blockout for the upcoming offensives. This happened in the Kherson and Kharkiv counteroffensives. This is not surprising at all. But I don't know if they're like literally calling for that. Well, they are calling for that now. They're saying, please don't talk about, Ukrainian offensives. So I don't know if that means it's imminent or whether there's going to be a slow ramping up to the counteroffensives and that they might take place in late spring. Wagner boss has claimed, so Prigozhin has claimed over 5,000 Russian prisoners have been freed after fighting in Ukraine. Head of Russian state-backed Wagner mercenary group has claimed on March the 25th that more than 5,000 Russian prisoners who fought in Ukraine were offered amnesty. And the interesting verbiage there is were offered amnesty. Have they taken it? They've been offered it. Yeah, you can have this, but you can't. Like, we're just saying it, but you actually have to stay there. And if you retreat, we're going to shoot you. So I don't know what the reality of this is, but according to Prigozhin, 5,000 have been offered amnesty. Now, you'd assume if they don't have death wishes, that all of those 5,000 will go, thank you very much, then we're off ski. And then you've got 5,000 convicts on the streets. If that's not happening, then that is something of a PR stunt, and those guys are still being forced to fight. I don't know what the reality is there. Russian forces. So this is a defending Ukraine's art and culture from destruction release, saying Russia's forces have damaged more than 550 sites and objects important to Ukraine's history and cultural identity. They have looted paintings, icons, and sculptures from several museums. These are war crimes, right? By one count, occupiers stole 15,000 paintings from the Shavkunenko Arts Museum in Kherson. Just be interested of those pro-Russian voices in my threads, of which there are many. What are your thoughts on that? Is that cool? Is that fine? Is it all right to go to countries and just steal all their artifacts? Now, Don't go, whoa, look at the Elgin marbles that the British stole from the Greeks. Yeah, we did. And do you know what? I think we should give them back. So, whatever. That was several hundred years ago. It's not happening right now, right? I do and have made and have included in one of my books claims that they should be given back. So that whataboutery aside, what do you Russian voices say about the stealing of cultural artifacts from the Ukrainians? I'm just interested. Is that fine? Is that cool? Or is it a war crime? Okay, go on to military aid. Let's move to Putin. Russia to modernize 1,600 tanks over the next 3 years. So that's what he said in interview. Now, 1,600 is, it sounds great. That is both producing new ones and modernizing old ones. So Putin said that the country planned to modernize 1,600 tanks available in its stock over the next 3 years, as well as ramp up tank production. The Russian state media reported Putin's claim appears to be a threat against Ukraine and Western nations, which a Russian leader claims plan to send 420 to 440 tanks to Kyiv. Neither the West nor Ukraine revealed the exact number of advanced tanks Kyiv is set to receive in the nearest months. So even if these numbers are accurate, and they probably aren't, I'd say almost certainly aren't, that works out to be 533 tanks over a year, over a 3-year period. And that's not just new tanks. Those are just like old T-55s being renewed or old T-62s being modernized. Russia has lost close to 2,000 tanks in Ukraine in just over a year's fighting. In other words, if this is true, and if Russia can produce and throw into the battlefield 533 tanks a year, right, which is about 1.5 a day, 1 and a bit a day, right? They are today. What did they lose today? 15 tanks today. So okay, it's not going to touch the sides really. If they've lost 2,000 over the year, and they're going to bring 500 worse tanks. They will be worse. They're struggling to get electronics, so it'd be losing 2,000 a year, replacing them with 500 worse tanks. Whereas Ukraine are getting better tanks than the ones they're losing. So I don't know. You do the maths. I've just done a little bit of it for you, actually. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about drones. So I had an interesting comment yesterday saying, I watch all of your videos, but you do go on about drones too much. You drone on about drones. You didn't say that. Missed opportunity. And I was like, do I? I don't think I particularly do, but interesting comment. And then I thought, well, actually, drones are super bloody important in this war. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. So United 24, which is a charity raising money for it's called the Army of Drones, and Mark Hamill from Star Wars and other really famous actors and celebrities have been endorsing this charity. They have raised $300 million for drones. That's a lot of drones, right? Trent Telenko saying that I have the distinct impression that future air power historians will look at the West's refusal to provide Ukraine manned fighters in a timely manner, and will be looked upon as the time marking when crewed jet fighters became obsolete. There's this claim now. The government is now working with more than 80 Ukraine-based drone manufacturers. So that's 80 manufacturers in Ukraine. Ukraine's defense minister Reznikov told Reuters. He said Kyiv needs hundreds of thousands of drones, many of which is looking to source from rapidly expanding domestic industry. I may talk quite a lot about drones because drones are bloody important. Like everything that happens on a battlefield is happening pretty much as a result of drone reconnaissance or direct drone warfare, spotting, all this stuff. IEDs being dropped, etc., etc. While Ukraine is rapidly ramping up its drone program, Russians are worried their capabilities are limited to the work of amateurs. Anastasia Kashevarova, who's a Russian volunteer, says that Ukraine has 1 million drones of all kinds and Russia is severely behind, but nothing is being done to alleviate the situation from the government side. Now, earlier on in the war, there was talk about the Orlan 10, Orlan 30, giving an advantage. They are low-tech drones, petrol-driven, but they were cheap and cheerful and have a really large range. And were doing a lot of damage to the Ukrainians as they were unable to have access to this similar kind of drones. They have a lot more shorter range drones on battery power and so on and so forth. They're good for your immediate battlefields, but if you want to send something a long way for a long time and give you an overall picture of everything going on behind the lines, then you need something like that. Well, now Ukraine have upped their production. They've got the Shark drones, all these kind of other drones being sent to the front. They've got Bayraktars and TB2s and et cetera, et cetera. They've just got this huge array, I think, of drones, and if they're not there now, then they are coming. We hear about the Kabul drones from Australia. We hear about all of these drone manufacturers, you know, thinking, well, being quite opportunistic, obviously. And are Russia doing the same? Don't really. It doesn't appear that they are. So they are struggling to manufacture at the same capacity. They are getting drones from China, but $12 million worth of drones, over time isn't huge, right? It sounds impressive, but it's not that impressive in the whole scale of things. So, you know, right, going on to artillery, Poland's showing again to the rest of Europe how it's done. Poland's PM has announced yesterday, that Poland will increase its ammunition production by several 100%. Most of the ammunition will go to Ukraine. Several thousand jobs will be created in Dezimet. This is what I've talked about a lot before, which is not just about throwing money at Ukraine. This kind of stuff stimulates the economy and creates jobs. France likewise plans to double the production of Caesar self-propelled 155mm howitzers. These self-propelled guns. The Caesars are very good. They've got an excellent range. This is reported by Les Echos with reference to the French minister Lecornu. So really good news there. And so just a few more images of training going on. I like seeing images like this or footage like this because you recognize that they are training on combined arms initiatives and maneuvers ready for their counteroffensive. So this is training that we don't see that Russia were doing ahead of their counteroffensive, and their counteroffensive got nowhere. They are using predominantly, infantry-based attacks in Bakhmut with very little mechanized support, whereas here we have, proper mechanization and a large variety of equipment. Now, it's exciting for the Ukrainians to think that they'll be getting that equipment soon on their front lines. Okay, now to go to some geopolitics. I said I'd return to Nord Stream. The Russian Navy was with a mini sub near the Nord Stream gas pipeline shortly before the explosions, as according to T-Online, German publication. I have not read this, haven't seen the details of this. I'll try and have a look at this today. It's noted that the boats SB-123 and Alexander Frolov were nearby. They have cargo cranes suitable for transporting explosive devices or mines weighing hundreds of kilograms into the water. The publication notes that almost all evidence points to the responsibility of Moscow, but government agencies have so far ignored T-Online's request on this matter. Fascinating. Is this part of the PSYOPs operation? I don't know. I need to look into this at greater depth, but I just throw that out there for you just to give you an idea, and you can go and look yourselves. I said I come away from that broadly saying I don't know who did the Nord Stream 2. And in fact, more recently, people have been saying, do you know who benefits the most out of Nord Stream 2? China. And that was something I'd never considered. I was like, does Russia benefit the most, or does the US to benefit the most, or Europe? And thinking in these terms, it turns out that you could argue that China, with their being able to get all their hydrocarbons from Russia at knockdown prices, because Russia can't transport them to Europe, China benefit the most. Was it China? I don't think it was, but do you know what I mean? It's like, who knows? It's really, really difficult to work out exactly what happened. Germany plans to expel more than 30 Russian diplomats from the country. This was reported by Focus with reference to a statement by German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. Again, worthy of note that strong bipartisan support for the USG to change its policy, so the US government, to support efforts of the ICC to prosecute Putin. Much more to do for the US support of the ICC, but this would be a good next step. Senators urged Biden to send evidence of Russian war crimes to the ICC. Bipartisan support, which is fantastic. Now, the US has been reticent to send evidence to the ICC because they don't want to open up a precedent that could get America in trouble in future wars in terms of war crimes. So, I don't know what that says about American, war efforts. But there is now pressure for the US to give the ICC evidence that they have compiled of Russian war crimes. And then finally, German Chancellor Scholz anticipates that the Russian war against Ukraine to continue until Putin realizes he cannot annex a substantial portion of Ukraine. When this realization is reached, it will become possible to come to a resolution to end the war. In other words, it's a bit like someone who's an addict. You know, you can't solve that addiction until they admit they have a problem. That's kind of how I interpret that. So it's Putin. Come on, you got to admit you got a problem here. Like, you're not going to annex those regions, really, are you? No, you're not. So once you admit that, then we can go about resolving this. But as long as you live in that bubble of delusion, self delusion, then actually we can't do anything. Nothing can be done. You're just obstinately sitting there, thinking that, you know, like an alcoholic. Oh, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem. Like a narcissistic, megalomaniacal dictator, you're sitting there going, yeah, it's all going well, or it's going well enough. We can still do this. We can still do this. We can still do this. Delusion, delusion, delusion. You can't. I don't think you have the means with which to execute a successful war from here. And even from last April, when I wrote an article saying exactly that then. Anyway, that's today's news update. Really appreciate you watching this video and following my channel. Please like, subscribe, and share. And I may not be able to get you videos till much later tonight, if at all. But hey, it's Sunday and family and all that. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.